Thank you very much. Thank you all, the witnesses. My first several questions that I was going to ask are a bit repetitive of what the testimony that we've heard, and that is that a population-based only, population-only based formula is not satisfactory to meet the demands and to meet different regions of the country, urban, rural, declining populations, growing populations. So I'm not going to re-ask that question. I see shaking heads. So thank you for that. And thank you for confirming that. As I'm thinking about this, I think that the devil's in the details, because there has to be a good definition of what is need. Is a need you don't have enough capacity for a growing population, or is a need such as what Senator Sullivan brought, or what somebody in a more rural state might have with aging infrastructure? And I think Ms. Dreyfus-Wells, you addressed some of that in some of your testimony. So I guess maybe I'll start with Mr. Ramser to say, what is the definition of need? Is it aging? Is it leaking? Is it not enough capacity? Wouldn't we be well served? I mean, maybe you can't weigh in on this, but I think we would be well served to make sure definitionally, if we're going to look at this, what does need mean? So is there a definition for need in this statute, or even in the Safe Drinking one?
I'd have to circle back on the Safe Drinking Water Act precise definition, but under the Clean Water Act, the needs surveys that have been published, every 4 years or so from EPA, they have multiple categories of needs, including stormwater, the big ones, wastewater treatment, but to some degree, those categories have changed over the years. So if Congress were to look at updating the formula based on needs, this would be a central question: what is needs, and how wide should the scope of needs be?
Mr. Sigmund, do you have a comment on that? Am I barking up the right tree here?
Oh, need needs to be very broad. All the things you've talked about, you said, is it this or this or this? Yes, it's all of them.
It's all the above.
In addition to aging infrastructure that needs to be refreshed periodically in order to meet the needs, you have, again, growth, the ability to handle growth, whether it's population or other growth, as well as to be able to deal with pending or current regulatory changes. So need is very, very broad, and we need to consider that, be wide in our consideration.
Ms. Dreyfus-Wells, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I think one way to think about need is that our job as wastewater and stormwater managers is to support the land use of our communities. And so that gives a very broad, as Tom said, definition of need. So we have aging infrastructure that has to be replaced. And I would look to local governments, to mayors, to hear about this need as well. I'll just throw out the example of the city of Maple Heights in Northeast Ohio, common trench sewers, 80 years old, failing, cracking, basement flooding, these types of issues. So that is a need that is unique to Northeast Ohio, but goes to this issue of aging. So we as wastewater managers, we support land use, and so that spreads that need across many categories.
Ms. Watson?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I agree with everything that's been said. I'll just add a little bit of a different flavor. There's, on the one hand, the definition of need, then there's also the ability to demonstrate need. And I think that is another issue that we run into with smaller communities, with rural communities, with disadvantaged communities. It is quite onerous to put together a capital improvement plan to actually demonstrate need. And so technical assistance resources to those communities would go a long way.
And that's a repeating theme I think we've heard as well. And we know our cities and communities and counties under the COVID relief were given dollars, and one of the qualifying areas was water and wastewater infrastructure. And, I know from my mayors, they can't figure out how to do this, and then you encourage them to go regionally, and that's not a concept that a lot of mayors really, or county administrators really embrace in our state. Regionally is hard for us, but I think it's probably the more efficient way to go. So let's just say we begin to look at a different way to calculate the formula. If, in fact, we were to do so, it would change from year to year, or I'm getting to the issue of certainty and predictability. I mean, how important is that to you, Ms. Dreyfus-Wells?
It's very important. I think the point of delivering infrastructure efficiently for our customers is having a long-term capital plan. So at the sewer district, we look at these things over a very long time frame, and it involves advanced facilities planning, and then it involves detailed design as you come into actually bidding a project. So that certainty around funding is very important so that you can put together a capital plan that takes advantage of efficiencies from putting together a well-run plan.
Thank you. My last comment will be, if I can, Mr. Chairman, is I see this as this could almost become a cycle. If you're in a declining population area and you aren't able to secure funds to modernize your water and wastewater systems, in my view, that further declines your ability to attract jobs, to attract residents, to attract people into those areas. So if you don't have the ability, because it's only based on population, and certainly this would be environmental justice communities would fall into this category, you're really going to perpetuate that cycle. And on the other hand, if you go to growing population areas and way increase the amount of money for those, then you're going to keep creating more population and you're going to be getting more and more dollars to be able to modernize. So I think we have to be very careful here, particularly as we're looking at declining populations and rural populations, that we're not feeding into a phenomenon that a lot of these populations are trying to fight right now. So I thank you all for your testimony. Thank you for listening.